when Dame Judith Hackett talked about resident engagement, what she said is, there should be, this is her statement, I've not wrote this, a cultural change is required to rebuild trust and ensure residents feel safe in their homes again, providing reassurance, recourse and responsibility to residents is one part of the overhaul designed to deliver buildings that are safe now and will be in the future. She makes it very clear that she wants our customers to feel safe, and to feel safe, there's lots of work we've got to do in terms of physical work, doors, compartmentation, all the fire alarm systems, everything that Ventro do. We need to work with your residents. You can't just walk in, throw a letter at them and say, we're going in your door, let us in. We need to work with them. We need to explain why. We need to say why we're doing it. And then we work closely with Neil, with Tom, with anybody else that's on here about that resident engagement. They should be expected to be safe in their home. We should make sure that they're safe. They should know how their landlord is performing. So we should be clear, open and transparent. They should know whether we've serviced their fire alarm. They should know if we've done the emergency lighting. They should know if their property's got risk assessment actions outstanding. So they should have complaints dealt with promptly and fairly. A criticism of Grenfell was a lot of, they say the customers were complaining about elements of the property and nobody listened to them. Nobody took it into account, where we get customer voice from. They want to be treated with respect. It doesn't matter, my current business, we own properties, we don't own any. We manage properties where the flats may be worth 1.5, 2 million pounds a property. So a customer in one of our flats has a 2 million pound property. That makes them absolutely no different to the customer that's, living in a social rented property. They should be respected, whatever their circumstances. They should have a good quality home and neighbourhood to live in. This affects more social housing than it does ourselves. Like I say, we manage properties on behalf of customers. But they should have a good quality home. They shouldn't have damp. They shouldn't have fire safety issues. They shouldn't have compartmentation issues. They should have a good quality home. And at the bottom, to have their voice heard. If they want to tell us something, they should be listened to, and we should take into account what they're saying. And, I've done many resident meetings, and, the customers are not always right, but it's not about saying they're not right. It's about listening to them and explaining to them why they're right, or potentially, why that they're not understanding what you're saying to them.
Getting that resident buy-in into the project that you're about to undertake will help you astronomically, one, for the resident, which is the most important part, to keep them safe. But from a delivery point of view, if you don't have the resident engagement, if you don't have them invested in your project, make it their project, essentially, you're not going to get the first time access. You're going to have continuous problems going on. And from a social landlord point of view, a simple thing like residents not really understanding the importance of all of the hardware that's on their fire door, for example, a closer. If you've not consulted with the residents at the pre-stage, if you've not really understood the individual importance of a door to them, i.e., for example, you may have elderly residents who find it hard to push open doors. If you've not consulted with them, if you've not sat down with them and then understood that there's limitations in a conventional closer, you need to put on an automatic closer, all you're really doing is buying time up to a point where they detach the closer, in which case the door is now not compliant. 95% of our communications are run through our TLOs. Our tenant liaison officer is somebody who will be independent of the organization we're partnered with. That really helps the independence part, because essentially they're not the same person chasing for rent or chasing for you've left your buggy out in the communal area, please move it. They're specifically focused on delivering the fire safety, and that constant stream of communication allows us to build a relationship with those residents. So then when we do have to gain access to get the doors installed, to do the fire stopping and the boxing, to maybe upgrade a fire alarm system, it's always going to be positive. It's always going to be right. This is a benefit to you. The key things that to worry about, what constitutes a vulnerable resident, and in the actual in the current guidance and the current legislation as well, this still falls within the responsible person's remit to identify those residents and then put personalized evacuation plans together. So they should already be in place. You should already know where you've got vulnerable residents, how they would be able to evacuate?
On a weekly basis. So fire resistance is determined by a fire test in what we call a full-size furnace, which you can see on the slide there. So that's a 3 meter by 3 meter furnace. And the sample door sets or specimen door sets that are tested, we test to BS 476 part 22, which is the British standard, and then BS EN 1634 part 1, which is the European standard. And the British government have adopted that as a designated standard. The rating of fire doors is similar to walls and floors, and this is usually 30 minutes, 60, 90, or 120 minute rating. Typically, a fire door would be tested in the most onerous format. For example, the largest amount of glazing, the minimum of building hardware. So we'd put 3 hinges. So there's the option to upgrade to 4 hinges, but fire test with 3. And of course, the door closer. So why the focus on door opening forces today? The government has introduced the Disability Discrimination Act in 95 to prevent discrimination against those that are less able. And since then, legislation has continued to evolve in the Equalities Act with the intention of ensuring that public and corporate spaces are accessible to all. Door opening forces form a critical part of ensuring universal accessibility, as the effort required to open the door can be immediate.
So intumescent seals, the actual meaning of the word intumesce is that it's a product which will swell up. And with the intumescent seal, once heat hits it, that's what starts the reaction and starts the intumescence process. Typically, as you can see there, an intumescent seal itself is only 2 millimeters in thickness. They're as the diagram shows there, they're always 99% of the time supplied within a PVC sleeve, which is probably typically 3, 4, 5 millimeters thick. But the intumescent part itself is only 2 millimeters. And when a fire takes place, the heat source is there, this 2 millimeter thickness will increase to around about 20 millimeters if allowed to free expand. Obviously, that doesn't mean you can have a 20 millimeter gap between your door and the door frame, but where you have that nominal 3 to 4, 4.5 millimeter gap, there's plenty of material there to expand to fill that void. And the big killer in a fire situation is the smoke. The whole idea of a cold smoke seal is to try and stop the corridors, the stairwells, the building in general becoming smoke logged. When a door burns, when we fire test it or burns, again, although there's an intumescent seal between the door leaf and the frame, an awful lot of smoke is still pumped out from the fire side to the non-fire side. And this smoke will obviously build up in corridors, etc., which is again why having the corridor doors shut on auto closers, not using fire extinguishers to prop them open, and all these sorts of things are crucial in providing that clear escape route.
Annotated as-built drawings is critical as part of building the description of the building. As predicted, it will be required in one of the first key requirements. So the fire strategy plan effectively maps the defects onto the floor plans to allow the quick identification, planning and delivery of a remedial works. And also it links to one of the next slides, but the fire strategy drawings, as many of you would know, may be required as these also go along with the retrospective fire strategy reports as part of the description and building up your fire strategy on your blocks or your specific block.